Welcome back to another episode of BHAW Radio. This is episode 55, and we got a special guest coming back to co-host. We got Jordan Tom in the house. His hair is a little bit longer. He's a little bit wiser, a little bit more out of the military. And as our guest tonight, we have 1998 graduate, Colonel Ryan Seagreaves. He was a four-year wrestler for the Army team, active duty Army officer, currently serving at the Army War College, and 17 in the butt days from submitting his retirement. Welcome to the show, Colonel Seagreaves.
Thanks, B-Row. Thanks, Jordan. Glad to be here.
Yeah, this is
baby.
Gonna be fun. What were you gonna say?
I said, let's get it going.
Yeah, so we were on it. So my first interaction with you, we were on a Zoom call that Coach Ward put together for like the point of contacts for each of the classes. And I remember just how excited you were about, like, you're like, I love Army wrestling. I love the Army. So then when I find out you're like so excited about retiring, I'm like, wait, why did we do this? No, I'm just teasing. But yeah, Brad Fenske, he recommended you on here. So, you know, we definitely, when people recommend people, we definitely want to have them on too. So just added to getting you on the show. So I appreciate it.
Well, I'm glad to be here. And, you know, I'd say I thank Brad, but, you know, I never was able to really thank Brad with a threat because, you know, he normally would thump you. He pretty much thumped everybody in the room. So, but yeah, he's one of the nicest men I have ever met in my life off the mat. On the mat, he's not a nice human being. But we can talk about that later.
He was a lot more. I didn't realize he was that personable. Like he seems like very quiet. And when he came on the show, he was very he seemed very social and personal. I was like, whoa, I didn't know. Like I didn't get that impression of when I knew him as like he was there on faculty when I was a cadet. So it was. Yeah.
So his personalities. You're not mistaken in thinking that. When we were cadets together, he was very, very quiet, very reserved. And then we were together for a year at Command and General Staff College, and he was much more interactive. I don't know, you know, let's just say, I think Brad was he's focused in a good way.
Well, this episode is not about Brad Fenske. This episode.
There you go.
Yeah. So tell us about the Workhouse. So you've been there for a little while now. You know, you're going to be there for like another year. This is the first time we've ever talked about the War College on here. So before we get started about your journey, tell us a little bit about that, kind of what you're doing. Let's get into that.
Yeah, so I came here in the summer of 2018 to be a student at the War College. And it was pretty evident once I got back I'm a Pennsylvania native. So it's pretty evident to me once I got back, and I'm close, you know, 90 minutes away from all my friends and family. In whether it's in Allentown, Pennsylvania, or my brother's in Coatesville, PA, or an uncle in State College. And it was pretty clear to me I was never leaving again while I was a student. So thankfully, I did well enough in the school that I was able to get a job on the faculty afterwards, and this will be my last assignment. So yeah, 1st of October, the retirement papers are going in for a 1 October 22 retirement. So, and with all the special leave accruals with COVID and everything, they're letting you carry over more than 60 days. So I'm going to be done in May, which is pretty awesome.
That's no time away.
Yeah. And we're not, I'm not moving. So, which is really great that I can really, things like summer vacations can actually be a real thing in my family pretty soon, that's and not be moving every summer. So that's a nice thing. So yeah, I teach primarily in the distance education program, but I do some things with the resident course too. In fact, I'm getting ready to take a resident seminar to Gettysburg for their staff ride down there. And then I just, I coach football and wrestling. I coach a 7th and 8th grade football team. I do the defensive backs and the running backs. And then I coach wrestling too in the Cumberland Valley School District. So very fun.
That's awesome.
Doing normal stuff now.
So yeah, was there pushback? Like you coming in as a student and then being like, oh, I'm actually going to retire here? Like, did people try to like coach you away from that or mentor you away from that, or were people pretty understanding of it? Or is that even like a normal thing?
Yeah, I didn't get any pushback whatsoever. You know, for me personally, there's not too many Ranger qualified armor officers in my year group. And what that meant during my career was, you know, in whatever, 2004, 2005, and they modularized the brigade combat team, and all these infantry brigades got a cav squadron, and they want, you know, when you give infantrymen a cavalry squadron that's going to be manned by armor officers, if they're going to be forced to have an armor officer in their formation, they want a Ranger qualified one. Well, there's like two of us, right, in my group. So what that meant was I spent the last, you know, 10 years in infantry brigade combat teams, which at a certain level, you know, when you get to be, you know, 6, everybody knows everybody. And if you don't know the big dogs in your branch at the highest level, you know, your upward mobility is limited. And I was at that point, like, I was not going to get command of a, you know, like any type of brigade or 06 level command. And, you know, I'm perfectly all right with that. You know, especially finishing up in the War College is awesome. Like I have an awesome life for a colonel in the Army in my last assignment. So, and, you know, I'm home. So this is like perfect. I couldn't have written it any other way. So yeah, there was no pushback at all. And frankly, I did not expect this. I always had really planned on, retiring like a year after my squadron level command, right at 20. But I got blessed with, some really good dudes, that made me look really, really good. And so that command went well, and that translated into a nominative job. And I was the senior trainer for the CAF squadrons down at Fort Polk at Joint Readiness Training Center. And then I got picked up for colonel, and I got picked up for the War College, and they just, you know, like all this stuff I wasn't expecting or planning on just started rolling in. And I was just like, oh, you know, the Army's going to send me back to my home state and give me a master's degree essentially for free. Thanks. Like, you just say thanks, you go, right? You take it. So, you know, so yeah, so 20 became 24. And so I'm pretty happy about that. Right. And trust me, I got buddies that are, you know, that are 06 level commanders, and their lives are a lot more stressful and a lot more difficult than mine are right now. I mean, I went to a bunch of Penn State games, bunch of Army football games, bunch of Army wrestling matches, you know, a bunch of different, went to Big Tens, went to EIWAs, you know, whole lots of stuff I didn't get to do for the last 20 years. And I got to do it. So that first time we met, you know, we were at, when we were on for that POC thing, I was coming off a stretch where I was like 2 years in a row, I'd been to the Army Navy match. 2 years in a row, I was at Army Lehigh. I had just gone to like, and I think like the pandemic was just starting. And like that weekend before everything stopped, like Friday night, I was at EIWAs at Lehigh, and Saturday and Sunday, I was at the Big Ten championships at Rutgers. So I was like at peak, like wrestling.
Just living your best life right there.
Right. It was pretty awesome. So
you talk about being home back in the state of Pennsylvania, which is, you know, second best wrestling state to Ohio, unfortunately. But
you got to stick to the script, okay. Jordan. Stick to the script. Okay. It says the best.
That's okay. That's okay. We won't hold it against you. So, but you did grow up in the hotbed of the Pennsylvania State, Lehigh Valley area. Talk about growing up there, and then your decision to go to West Point, and what really drove you to making that decision.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I mean, so growing up in the Lehigh Valley, I mean, wrestling wise, like it's a blessing and a curse, right? I mean, it's awesome because it's so competitive at every level. And, you know, growing up, I mean, my high school program was not good. So there were some matches where like I had a buddy that wrestled for Harvard at the same time and who was a multiple NCAA qualifier. And, you know, if me or him didn't win, you know, when we were wrestling like Easton or Nazareth or Northampton, then it was a shutout, right? Like, so there was a couple matches where like we were losing like 62-3, right? The blessing was it was like, you know, when you left that area, you're better than you think you are. You know, and that really, and, you know, for me, you know, so I didn't really get contacted much by many places. You know, probably if I wouldn't have gone to West Point, I probably would have went to Bucknell. Coach, you know, Ferraro. I grew up with the Ferraro family, and Bob Ferraro was a longtime head coach there. He's still like he runs the Virginia Duels tournament, the whatever it is, the National High School something Coaches Association. He started that.
Yeah.
So I grew up with his brother, and so I used to go to Bucknell wrestling camp every year. And, you know, I was in contact with a couple other places, mainly because Jay Weiss is the coach of Harvard, is a Lehigh Valley guy. He's been the head coach at Harvard now for probably over 25 years because he's still there, and he was the coach like when I was in college, right? And Jay is like my father's, I don't know, second cousin or something like that. But Jay recruited me at Brown, and then he went to Harvard. And like, so my best friend from Allentown went to wrestle for Jay at Harvard. Not that I was going to go to Harvard, but Brown was an option because Jay was there. But, you know, the impact was, you know, you get to West Point, and I was like I had taken 5th in District 11, right, in a year where I can remember I didn't start wrestling my senior year until really late because my football team, we won this Pennsylvania State Championship. So I was on the radio on like Sunday morning in December, and like a whole bunch of guys from Northampton's wrestling team were there too. And they had just competed in the first like wrestling competition of the year. I hadn't been on a mat yet. You know, I think I want to say like my junior year or my senior year, like those 3 schools finished like number 1, 2, and 4 in like the USA Today top 25 ranking. So it was pretty insane. So what happened was, you know, I'd go to West Point, and, you know, there were some times in the lineup my senior year where it was like Jerry Thomas, 126, 3-time Nebraska state champ, Stein Edwards, 134, you know, Florida state champ, and Jarrett Matthews was at 150 for a while, you know, 2-time Oregon state champ. And it was like Ryan Seagreaves, 5th in District 11, you know what I mean? So, you know, so it was a blessing and a curse. So you were used to very, very tough competition, but it was really, really hard to do well. My decision to go to West Point, though, was really not, I mean, it was a place where I could continue my wrestling career, but I wanted to go, I wanted to join the service. So, you know, for me, it was, you know, I don't have I don't have Army or military service in my family background. Pretty, you know, liberal Catholic family from Eastern Pennsylvania. There's not a whole lot of military influence around there. But for me, I mean, for my freshman year was when Desert Storm happened. So I can remember clearly, like on my way to football practice my freshman year during double sessions and hearing on the radio, you know, like Iraq invaded Kuwait. And, you know, I was looking on a map and an encyclopedia that night, like, where the heck is Kuwait? And so I had, you know, like the January 15th when the UN deadline was where they had to get out, I stayed up all night watching TV, and I never stayed up all night for anything ever. My parents were like, "What are you doing? What's wrong with you?" And I was like, "This is the biggest thing in the world. I got to see what happens." And of course, nothing happened that night. The next night on January 16th was like the iconic scenes of like all the tracers going up in Baghdad, and CNN is broadcasting it. And it's like Bernard Shaw and Wolf Blitzer on CNN, you know, they were like, it's like the all-time famous like video. And I was exhausted because I'd stayed up all night the night before. I missed everything. I didn't see it all. I didn't see any of it. But no, I was just like, hey, this is the biggest thing in the world, and I want to be part of that someday. So I wanted to go. I wanted to go to one of the academies, and had a family connection, not a family connection. My head coach's older son was at West Point at the time, and so that's where I got kind of linked up with Coach Effner, and so it became an opportunity for me to continue my wrestling career. But mainly, I wanted to, I wanted to be in the Army.
So
Capitalizing on your opportunity for sure.
Yeah.
So I mean,
24 years later.
Like looking through, I mean, especially a lot of people that come through West Point, especially like when you're either not like highly recruited or you're not like super successful early. A lot of wrestlers like don't make it all 4 years, which is, I think, a testament to you, like, sticking out with the team and you weren't like a super successful wrestler, but, pretty competitive all 4 years too. Did you ever think about like not staying with the team? Were you close with a lot of your classmates?
Yeah. So yeah, not wrestling was ever like that. Never even registered for me. Like it wasn't even. That was not something that would never even entered my mind. Probably the closest. I mean, really, the big thing for me was like my freshman year. I want to say I was like 4th on the depth chart at 34, and was not happy. And I can remember like for like a JV match or something one night, and we had like a 5-pound allowance. I had to make 139, and was utterly miserable making 139. And I was like, why am I doing this? Like, so I told Jack that night. I was like, hey, I'm not wrestling 34 anymore, and he was moderately unhappy about that decision. I'll just leave it there. And he said I was making a big mistake. Now, the mistake was Brad Fenske was the guy at 142 that like everyone was avoiding 142 like crazy. I was like, man, I'm be 4th on the depth chart at 34. I can go to 42 and probably be 2nd. And so I went up to 42 mainly to not be miserable anymore. And so for the next like year and a half, I was getting beat up by Brad all the time. But a weird thing happened was, I wasn't the type of guy that could cut weight very well. I had to come down pretty gradually, and I had to wrestle right about where I was, because there was a noticeable decline in my performance if I was cutting weight hard, to the point where I was like, I don't do that.
It's a useless skill that only benefits you for a very small period of time. So
yeah,
it's okay.
Even with night before bands back then too.
Yeah, even that. Like if I cut 10 pounds in a couple days, even with weigh-ins the night before, like I would not recover. I would be super sluggish in the 3rd period. I'd run out of gas. I don't know what it was. Like my body didn't work that way. And so, but anyway, when I went up to 42, what happened was I wasn't miserable anymore. And when I was at wrestling practice, I was thinking about getting better at wrestling. I wasn't thinking about my weight all the time. And lo and behold, I got better really fast. So I went from like 5-7 at 134 as a freshman to 19-10 at 142 as a sophomore. And mainly it was just from, I felt good at practice, and I got better. And then, you guys know what that room is like. I mean, there's state champions everywhere, right? So if you're interested in getting better, all the opportunity in the world is there for you in that wrestling room. You just gotta grab it. And I grabbed it and got to a point where, I got myself into the conversation to be in the lineup. So kind of went from there.
So a little tidbit for the listeners. As I was doing my research and looking through the media guides, I'm like, seeing how many years you led her, like all trying to get all the stats. And I see a little asterisk next to your name. And I'm looking through all the other names, like the rest of it, as I'm going to the bottom of that section, and there's no one else has an asterisk. And I'm like, what can this asterisk mean next to his name? It's like during the 96, 97 season, he lettered at Army and also Air Force. And I was like, that's kind of cool, but also kind of weird. I don't know how I would ever wrestle at another academy. I'd probably just fight him all the time, but maybe you did that too. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I decided to compete for the Academy Exchange Program, and I got selected. So I got selected to go to the Air Force Academy, which is where I wanted to go, because who would want to go to Navy? I didn't want to go there.
Right.
And it was like, I was never going to put their crap on. And so, but I wanted to go to Colorado. Like I never really traveled. I mean, the first time I ever got on a plane was like after my plebe year. I'd been in like Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, and Maryland, period, before I went to West Point. So I wanted to get on a plane and go see some other things. And so I went to the Air Force Academy for a semester and just rolled onto their team. And, that was an awesome experience, right? I had some momentum because I was this close to being a 20 match winner as a sophomore, and I was pretty determined to do that as a junior. It was an interesting interaction because, you don't get junior transfers at the academy, right? So that like personal dynamic with my new Air Force teammates was pretty frosty at first, as you can imagine. That very few people talked to me. In fact, almost none of them did, really, until our first competition. So we had the first competition we went to was the Wyoming Open at the University of Wyoming, and I was like number 2 on the depth chart out there. There was a guy at 42 that no matter what, I couldn't beat him. I'd lose 4-3, 3-2. It was always a 1-point match. He'd get a takedown, and I couldn't get a takedown on him or something like that. And anyway, it turned out like he was kind of a practice room king, and like I wrestled in 3 tournaments out there, and I took 2nd, 1st, and 3rd, and that dude didn't place in anything. So the first tournament, if you some of those early tournaments and the coaches, they take like 20 or 30 guys. There's always a couple of your teammates sitting in your corner, right? I tell you, one of the loneliest feelings I ever had was like my first or second match out at Air Force, and I was wrestling, and I looked over my corner, and none of the teammates were there. It was just one like assistant coach, the guy that was a major, who had to sit there, right? like he didn't have an option. And I never, like, that was one time where I can remember I was probably never lonelier out there and missing my teammates more than I was like during that first match. And then a funny thing happens, like winning matters. And so a couple matches later, when the starter is done and I'm in the semifinals in a brawl against some kid from Nebraska that got pretty spicy. I looked up one time and there's like 15 of my teammates sitting in the corner in the semifinals when it counts. So after that tournament, and then I went in the finals, I wrestled a kid that was I think he was like the D2 runner-up the year before. It's from Northern Colorado. And it was an awesome, super fun match. He gave me a point for unsportsmanlike conduct. I gave him a point for unnecessary roughness. It was a match where the ref literally in the 3rd period pulled us in for like the 3rd time, was like, look, I've warned you. I've penalized both of you. Obviously, nothing I say matters. So I'm just letting you two meet and go. Have fun have fun killing each other. Said that to us in the middle. He's like, I'm not even going to make you shake hands. Just go. I'm not calling anything anymore. What's that?
That's a good ref right there.
It was awesome. I loved it. So I
It
ended up
sounds like
losing.
Randall in a match with Casey and Jordan.
Yeah, sounds about like my childhood.
So I
So I
lost.
have all the questions. So were you attached or unattached? Were you wearing an Air Force singlet? Like I'm still confused.
Yeah, I wore an Air Force singlet. I wore an Air Force singlet and wrestled for them. And, you know, they would always ask, well, like, what would happen if you would wrestle Army? And I said, well, I wouldn't do that. Number one. Number two, the reason I came here is because I already knew like that wasn't a possibility in the fall semester. You know what I mean? We're just going to go to like 3 open tournaments or something like that. And that was it. So we went, you know, I wrestled in the Wyoming Open, the Southern Colorado Open, and the Oklahoma Open over Thanksgiving. And it was great. So I got to see all this like Pac-12, Pac-10 and Big 12 competition and everything. You know, I didn't wrestle anybody from the East Coast, which was awesome. So it was really fun and you know, great experience. I, you know, loved it. It was actually neat the following year at the Academy Championships, seeing all those guys again, like at weigh-ins and stuff. So that was kind of a neat thing, you know. And then that night at dinner, all my Army teammates were like, why are you talking to those guys? They're not your friends. You know what I mean? Like I got reminded, like, don't be a traitor, you know?
So you didn't wrestle any dual meets for them. I'm wondering how like the NCAA like compliance and like you wrestling in one school and another, like, was it just kind of like because they're open tournaments, it was like, nobody cares.
Yeah. So I have no idea, honestly. And I don't really think anybody cared anyway. Right. Like no one was tracking some random junior at West Point that wasn't ranked in the top 20. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think anybody really even cared. Yeah, you know, when you think about NCAA eligibility and especially today, like with all the transfer portal stuff that you see, like, I don't know. You know, I can remember looking at, what is it, Bugle Notes, the little Bugle Notes thing. I remember reading something in there. There was a cadet that was like, I don't know, in the 80s or the 90s, like did the exchange, was like a soccer player and like went to Navy for a year, lettered for Navy their junior year. And then, you know, like scored the winning goal against Navy their senior year when they were back at Army. So I was like, hey, if that dude can do it, I can do it. It's just in the same season. And so I came back at Christmas time and, you know, I came back, I wrestled in like the Wilkes Open and I dropped down to 34 again. Like I became more mature and watched what I was eating. So my junior and senior year, I'd wrestle 42 in the fall. I dropped to 34 over Christmas time. I'd wrestle 34 for the rest of the, you know, the spring semester and, the conference meets and stuff like that. And
so like the fall season was like Crispito season for you.
Yeah, I was. I gradually come down.
Do you think you're maybe the only Army wrestler that's ever done the transfer program? I've never heard of anyone. So if anybody knows someone, drop it in the comments because I'm very interested. But I think you might be the only.
I don't think anyone's ever done it. Now, I'm sure if you ever have Jack on the program, like I'm sure he didn't like it at all. But you know, I mean, like I said, like I wasn't a starter at that point, and I wasn't really, I don't know. I wanted a new experience, and I didn't think I was being like disloyal. It wasn't like I wasn't wrestling, right? Like I was going somewhere and getting a whole new level of competition. And when I came back, I mean, I was still, I think mainly Jack was happy, at least with me when I came, because I dropped back to 34. So when I had like saw him again and rejoined the team, like I had just wrestled 134 at the Wilkes Open and he was like super pumped that I was back at 34. You know, even though when I was at 42, I had won like, 30 matches in a year and a half. You know what I mean? Like I was doing pretty okay at 142. So anyway, but it was a great experience. I loved it. I flew a glider. I soloed a glider out there. I did jump, got some free fall parachute wings while I was out there as part of the school.
Pretty awesome.
Yeah. So like some of their military classes, they do
Mhm.
like instead of like boxing and wrestling and gymnastics and swimming and stuff, they have soaring where you get on a bus to the airfield and you fly a glider. And then they have jump where you go to the airfield and they train you up and you jump out of an airplane.
That stuff doesn't exist anymore. Just so listeners know, this isn't a recruiting episode for the Air Force Academy. This is for.
Yeah, my bad.
Yeah, I don't think Coach Moore would let it fly anyway.
We're gonna have to edit this piece out now.
So something that's interesting that I want to hear about. So we've heard from some grads that were at West Point during 9/11, which obviously we just had the 20th anniversary, which sounds weird to say it that way, but 20-year remembrance. Then we've heard from some people that were second lieutenants and at Bullock during the time, but you would have been a young officer, probably would have been like probably on the brink of captain or a captain when it happened, I'm assuming. What was your experience? Yeah, what was your experience like when that occurred and just what transpired after and how it shaped, I guess, probably your entire career?
Yeah, so I was stationed at Fort Hood at the time. And I would actually, my armor battalion, I was a battalion scout platoon leader, and my armor battalion was deployed to Kuwait. We were the rotational, used to call it Operation Desert Spring, right? We were the rotational armor battalion. There would always be one there for like 4 months. So I was there from April to August of 2001. And I remember like while I was there, there was one point where like they had split the battalion in half, and it was really like a battalion task force. We took more than our battalion. And we were doing force on force training. And there was a certain, and like I had a 10 Humvee scout platoon, and half of it were the bad guys and half of it were the good guys with me. And I remember that one day they called me to the command post and they were like, Viper 1, this is whatever. You need to come to the TOC immediately. And I thought, oh man, I'm getting fired for something, right? Especially when like the first thing that the operations officer said was, go immediately back to the camp, take off all the miles gear off your trucks. And I was like, oh man, I really am fired. Like they're kicking me out of the exercise. I'm so bad, right? And he was like, hey, get your body armor and go to the ammunition holding area and draw a full basic load. And so what had happened was when all the threat reporting was going on pre 9/11, like in late July and early August, they went to like, what was it called? Like threat condition Delta on the perimeter. And so all in the Saudi Arabian Peninsula went to threat condition Delta. So you had to have like armed guards around everything. And so the training exercise for my battalion continued, and my scout platoon was literally doing an armed patrol around the training area while they were doing their force on force training. And literally, so we came back mid-August, and our second day back to work was 9/11. And so we went nuts for 8 weeks like everybody, but then we went right back to Kuwait in November. And so I was there for 4 months. I was home for 3, and then I was back there again for 5 months. We were right on the border of Iraq, and that ended up being like the run up. Like we were there, like when the president gave his Axis of Evil speech, that was a unique experience, right? And then, the rest of it is a blur. I mean, I came back from that. I went to and like all of us, all the lieutenants, baby captains in my unit, where we were all about to go to the captain's course. Everybody's schools got canceled and we all deployed again. So I did the career course after that, and then it was right at the beginning of Iraq. So I ended up doing, in my next assignment as a captain, I did a year in Iraq, home for 10 months, and then another year in Iraq the second time as a tank company commander. And so I was like, I hadn't even hit 8 years of service yet, and I had 4 deployments under my belt already. And so I got a job. I was a small group instructor at the Armor Captain's Career Course at Fort Knox. And then I ran the Armor Basic course for close to 2 years after that and trained literally 1,000 Armor lieutenants, literally 1,000.
Yeah.
And then CGSC, and then I was at Fort Campbell as a major and did an Afghanistan combat tour there. And then I went to Afghanistan again as a cavalry squadron commander out of Fort Carson, Colorado. So I don't know. For me, I've literally deployed in the 4 troop assignments that I've been in as a lieutenant, a captain, a major, and lieutenant colonel. I deployed to the Middle East twice in the one as a lieutenant, twice as a captain, once as a major, and one as a lieutenant colonel. So I'm close to the point where saying I have not deployed in the rank of colonel. So hopefully I don't have to do that.
Yeah, I think you're good with that one. So
We're crossing fingers for you.
we actually overlapped a little bit at Campbell. I didn't realize you were a Rock-a-thon. You don't have like a Tory like tattoo or anything on you. You're not
don't.
like those, are you?
I don't have a Tory tattoo, but in my house, you're never far from some Rock-a-thon bling. We like to mark stuff. So that's the coaster that my water bottle's on.
So you did command as a tank commander, and then field grade time, light. Which do you prefer? We haven't had a lot of like Army talk on these episodes, but we have a lot of young officers and people shaping. Like, what did you prefer? Do you like the light infantry, kind of armor, or heavy side of things? What's your take on that?
So I don't know. It's hard for me to pick one. Being an armor officer is awesome, especially if you're especially if you're in a combined arms battalion and you're in a tank company. Being a tank company commander in combat in Iraq I never felt safer in combat than I did when I was a tank company commander. Well, I don't know. One of the safest I ever felt in combat was when I was a tank company commander, and I was as you would imagine, it's not like they put you in a safe place when you're a tank company commander. You're the guy that they send when things are bad. And so, that's just awesome. Nothing says we care like 70 tons of love showing up on your front yard. But as a lieutenant, hey, when I was in right in 2001, I was watching HBO and Band of Brothers came out. And Band of Brothers came out when I was a lieutenant. And I remember watching that at Fort Hood and being like, man, I wish I could serve in the 101st. But there was like one slot for one armor captain in the entire 101st Airborne Division. And then in 2004, they modularized the BCTs and they made brigade combat teams, and they all added a cav squadron. So all of a sudden, all these infantry brigade combat teams needed armor officers, and I happened to be Ranger qualified. I was one of the few unicorns that was, because I had a wrestling OC at school, a guy named Captain Bill Boyce, retired as Lieutenant Colonel Bill Boyce, and he was an infantryman. I hung out with him when I was the grad assistant coach, and he was like, he hazed me and said, if I didn't go to armor school, or if I didn't go to Ranger school, then, it was a judgment on my manhood. Right. So I went to Ranger school because Bill Boyce told me to go to Ranger school, because one of my wrestling ORs went, he was an Army wrestler. So yeah, I got to go to the 101st, and I was deployed all those times as a lieutenant and a captain. Well, then and then I was a small group instructor. You're a pretty hot commodity.
With Jordan, we lose him for a second.
I'm still here.
School wrestler.
Ryan, I think we lost like the last like 10 seconds of that.
Oh, sorry.
It like cut out.
Okay.
Yeah, so we missed that last part. Like you mentioned you were a small group instructor, and then before you were transitioning, it just kind of cut out.
Yeah, what I was saying was I got recruited with all that time deployed, all those deployments as a major. I got recruited harder as a major by the divisions coming out of CGSC than I did as a high school wrestler. To the point where like a battalion commander called me on Christmas Eve. A brigade executive officer called me on Christmas Day. And I was like, come on, sir, let me go. Like, but I wanted to go to the 101st. So, yeah, I love being a Roxanne is awesome. It's like the Yankees of infantry regiments. Everybody hates them, but everybody wants to be one, right? Like, this is pretty cool. I know as a
Stone's where it's at.
Bastogne guy, you're gonna say
We
something
don't
different.
have to talk about how cool we were. I'm just teasing, kind of.
No, so and then the Cav Squadron I commanded at Fort Carson, I was in I took command of 361 Cavalry. So if you've seen The Outpost on Amazon Prime, with Orlando Bloom and Cock Keating, so that's a squadron that I commanded. Now all that stuff happened in 2009. I commanded the squadron in 2015. So I got to go to a special place as a lieutenant colonel, and that being part of that military lineage, that was something that you could feel. I haven't felt a brotherhood like that honestly since Army wrestling. Maybe it was just lucky that the guys that I was with, but being in that squadron, it's like the Medal of Honor squadron. They have 2 living Medal of Honor recipients, right? And I don't know. I just think everybody ran a little bit harder, lifted a little bit heavier, trained a little bit longer, being there to live up to that, that lineage, the people that came before us there. That's a pretty special place. So, that was a super fun time for me as well. And, that, and like I said, like I thought I was going to retire right after that. That was like going out on top. Like that was like the Super Bowl for me. So, but that was one of because those guys did so good, they made me look really good. And so I got promoted again, and the Army sent me back to school. And now I'm, whatever, 5-6 years later, I'm still doing it. So,
Then it's my understanding you spent a small stint with the Marines. You just like to really do a lot of things with the other services, I guess.
Yeah.
How did that occur?
So, I was a brigade executive officer of the Roxans. I was 3rd Brigade 101st. And, frankly, the way it happened was I interviewed for a job to be an aide to a 4-star, and he took a long time to make a decision, and then I didn't get the job, and I was still a major, and Armor Branch came back and was like, "Yo, we're gonna hook you up and give you a job as a lieutenant colonel." And they gave me like 2 different options, and so one of them was going to work at the Joint Staff, the J7 in Suffolk, Virginia, and the other one was this exchange job with the Marine Corps. And so I said, "Hey, if I'm gonna go to the Joint Staff, like I want to work on the Joint Staff, like in the Pentagon in DC, go into like the remnants of Joint Forces Command, the J7 at Suffolk. It sounds like you just told me I got accepted to, Penn State's Wilkes-Barre campus, and he's like,
you're going to West Point, but you're really going to Citadel or something."
Yeah. He's like, "Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So you're going to Camp Lejune?" And I was like, "Yes, I'm going to Camp Lejune." So yeah, I spent 3 years surrounded by 50,000 of my closest Marine friends. And I got to do a whole lot of different stuff there as well.
Did you wear a Marine uniform?
No, I never wore a Marine uniform. No. Always wore all my Army stuff and represented well. And I had a good experience there. And, it turns out there is benefits Marines are in fact amphibious. And so their bases are close to water. And so like I lived in a house, literally 5 minutes from my driveway to the beach to North Topsail Island for 3 years. So I didn't take my kids to the park for 3 years. We went to the beach
It's awesome.
almost every day. So, you know, that was a pretty cool gig. Something you don't get to do in the Army unless you get lucky enough to get sent to like Hawaii or something like that. But
Yeah,
you know,
people don't understand it's a good area to live in. I'm there like every week for work, and then I mean, Camp Lejeune not like ideal right there, but you're like 20 minutes away from like a lot of stuff. So it's pretty
yeah.
cool.
So I lived in Sneed's Ferry. We'd go to North Topsail Island all the time. If you follow a guy like General Abrams, just retired, you know, the son of the guy the tank's named after. General Abrams just retired as a 4-star, and you know where he retired to? He owns a house on North Topsail Island. Like that's where he retired, you know. So it's a great spot. And so it's good family time there. It's good to do something new. And frankly, it's helped me a ton here at the Army War College in teaching joint warfighting. And so, because I got exposed to so much about the Marine Corps and the United States Navy and how they do things. And, you know, at the level I teach at now, I mean, everything is joint. So you need to understand how the other services do things when you're pondering things like fighting Russia or fighting China.
Yeah.
You know, so that was a really great experience especially for what I'm doing now. So it's really, really cool. All right, what else? Let's get back to Army wrestling.
Yeah, I was one thing we didn't, because Jordan went right into 9/11 stuff because, you know, of the remembrance and all that stuff, but you were a GA for the year, you know, after you graduated. I definitely want to hit on that because we didn't talk about, you know, you were a GA during the transition with Coach Effner and Coach Giles. You know, so if you could talk about that, I think that's cool because now that was a time where you were a GA, but you weren't associated with the prep school. Prep school was down in Fort Monmouth, but GA was, you know, up at West Point. So I think it'd be cool to like learn what that role is, because the way Coach Ward runs the team now is, you know, most of the recruits go to the prep school. You know, 2/3 of the recruits go to the prep school. He loves the prep school, very involved. You know, so talk about that whole experience and, you know, the transition between coaches and kind of how I understand it was kind of crazy. So I'll stop talking and you go.
Yeah. So, you know, Jack had asked me to be the grad assistant. So obviously, yeah, he wasn't too upset about the whole Air Force thing, right? He offered me a job. So Jack had asked me to be the grad assistant, and I, you know, I said yes. And you know, for the same reasons Brad Fenske talked about, you know, working, you know, it's pretty cool to work in Arvin Gym in shorts and a t-shirt every day, right? And like make sure guys get to practice, and guide guys through their workouts and stuff. But Jack then took the Cleveland State job like in May, like right before graduation. So I never actually worked for Jack. And so the athletic department named Todd Giles, who was our assistant, named him the interim coach. And then back then we also had a volunteer assistant, but the guy that was doing the volunteer assistant stuff, like the officer that was doing that, like he PCS'd. We weren't getting a new guy until like September. And so I only took I didn't take much leave at all after graduation. I had to come back because like it was me and Todd was like going to like a coaches convention, and he was recruiting, and he was going to other things and stuff, and going to like some camps or something. And so for most of the summer, I was like by myself running the program. I had to go to like the head coaches meetings in the athletic department. You know, I was studying the NCAA book to take my exam. Right. And, you know, I'm just learning like people's phone numbers in the athletic department. I'm trying to figure out on the fly, like what I really needed to do. And so yeah. And at the time, like this is how disconnected we were from the prep school. It was still at Fort Monmouth. Like, you know, I couldn't tell you who the head coach was there or who the coach was at the prep school. I had no idea. And literally the entire time that I was there. I had zero contact or interaction with the prep school team whatsoever. We were just trying to. I was just trying to keep the wheels on the wagon, right? And then the athletic department, and I don't know why, I didn't know what went on with the the job search, but they didn't name Todd as the head coach. It had to be like late September, early October. And so during all that intervening time, it wasn't like Todd could go like interview people to be the assistant, right? Because he didn't know if he didn't get the head coaching job, he would be the assistant. So it was like, so he couldn't really start interviewing anybody until he was the head coach. And so, it was, we got a really, really late start on the season. It didn't help that, my senior year, like there was a lot of talent, a lot of starters that walked out the door. Guys that were 3 and 4 year varsity letterman, Pat McGinn. I think there was probably like, there was some matches we had, like when we wrestled NC State my senior year, all 7 of us were in the starting lineup. And so everybody was like, I think there was only like 2 or 3 starters that were returning, maybe 3 or 4. And so, we had a lot of holes to fill, and that was a rough season. And then what we had pending was, it was our last, like they were going to start like an Arvin gym renovation. And so, you had all this coaching turnover, and then right then they were going into, I think they were over in like, they were near like one of the buildings next to the O Club or something like that.
Washington Hall.
Cullum
Hall. That's how they figured out how many lights were in Cullum Hall. It was just everybody getting pinned.
Yeah.
Jordan's back.
And so what happened was, I ended up being a lot more involved in the wrestling room than I thought I would be, to the point where I was planning a lot of practices, and running them start to finish, which, because Todd, once he got named the head coach, he had to go find an assistant then, which took a lot of his time. And by the time, we kind of got settled and got an assistant coach in there, and then got our volunteer assistant cranked up again, we got lucky in that the guy that became a volunteer assistant had done it in the past, and he came back to the program. So that helped us a little bit. But
was it an Army officer or like what?
Yeah, it was like a reserve Army officer, guy named Woody Woodworth. Really, really nice guy.
Oh, man.
He was, what's that? You remember Woody Woodworth?
I don't know who he was, but
yeah, awesome.
Yeah, nice.
Awesome guy, very helpful. I will never forget when he came back. That was a huge relief to me, because number one, he was like a major in the Army, and so he knew like the way things, like he knew Army stuff, right? Like you forget, I was a brand new second lieutenant, and so it wasn't like I knew Army things at all. You know what I mean? And I was still learning that stuff too. So it was definitely a tough transition, and it was made harder by the pace of the decision making, right? Like if with Todd being in interim status from like the middle of May until probably late September, that's, if you think about the life cycle of wrestling season, that's pretty late in the game to name your head wrestling coach. And so, and when he's the interim, it's not like he can do all the things that you would want that guy to do. So that was a tough transition. But we had some good guys in there. We had Troy Yagi in the room. We had Maurice Worthy in the room, Scott Siegfried and Dennis oh God, I'm blanking. Our two co-captains were solid guys. So it was, it was good once we got going. And
A
we,
couple year transition there in the early 2000s is just like a super unique period in Army wrestling history as we piece it together through all these different interviews. Just the transition of coaches and the transition of the wrestling room being built, 9/11 occurring, and just all these different things that occurred.
yeah.
Man, it was definitely some building blocks for where we are now. That's for sure.
Yeah. And so that's some of the reasons for my excitement. You know, when I came back here to PA and I went up for my 20th reunion and I talked to Kevin a little bit and I went to a couple matches and stuff and I was like, holy cow, like they got it going on in a way that, man, I wish it had been like that when I was there, especially with, the Base Realignment and Closure Commission closes Fort Monmouth and moves the prep school to West Point and you get a brand new prep school facility. I mean, that's a massive advantage for our program, having the prep school right there. And now, B-Row, you were talking like, hey, pretty much everybody goes to the prep school, right? I mean, I think I remember one of the talks with Kevin, he was like, hey, unless they're like a 4.0 student, they're going to the prep school. And I couldn't agree with that more, right? Like my senior year in college, I was 21. During my fourth year and final year of eligibility, I was 21 going through the whole year. I turned 22 a week before graduation.
Yeah, there's kids that are like 27 now.
Yeah. I mean, Yanni Diakomahalis just made the world team. What is he, like 24? And he's like junior eligibility, right? At Cornell. I think doesn't he have like 2 years left? At least, or maybe just.
He does.
Yeah.
I'd say the average college wrestler at this point graduates at 24 and a half. On average.
Yeah. And so that's such like just that extra year of maturity and growth and training, you know what I mean? Like 22, 23, 20. I mean, when I was 23, 24 years old, getting ready to go to Ranger school, man, I could eat lightning and crap thunder, I mean, if I had two more years of train, it's a massive advantage. So yeah, having the prep school right there and making that basically like part of the program and then having massive interaction through the wrestling club. Those are huge deals, which, and honestly, it's what, let's just like Coach Ward says, if you're going to be competitive, the national level, I mean, that's what you need to do. Right. So yeah, I'm getting ready to send some notes to some of my boys to become an insider and plug the program real quick here, become an insider and hey, let's start figuring out what we got to do to get the club the funds to get 3 athletes in residence there. So
that's where it needs to be. I look at the Navy RTC, they got athletes now, Colat's there, just for us to be able to compete at a high level, like that's the norm, kind of going across, and it's an advantage. I mean, we're able to get these, because of the way that Kevin's leadership is and the way the program's developed, like we're getting the recruits in, to be able to continue that progression and continue them on. I know getting Jesse Del Vecchia was huge this year. Season, for some of our, a lot of our, high talent is right around his weight class. So, I'm excited. We just added on to that.
So I know we're getting pretty low on time here. You want me to end with a funny Army wrestling war story?
Let's hear it.
Let's do it.
It involves a previous guest too. So,
Even better.
So Bernard Gardner. So yeah, Bean. So I didn't know Bean. He was. I'm pretty sure when I was the GA, I might have saw his name on a file or something because his name was familiar to me. But he was, I don't know what he's like. He's like 2004, 2005, something like that. 2004. Okay, so when I was in Afghanistan the first time, I was a CAB squadron executive officer, and we're end of our tour, and this is I want to say maybe like January or February of like 2011. And the Cav Squadron that comes in to replace us, and Captain Gardner is the Squadron S4. Now, I didn't know him, but he comes over on like the advance party or the torch party, getting ready for the relief in place. And so him and the executive officer he worked for, my counterpart, was a guy that I knew. We had been instructors together at Fort Knox. Great guy. And so they were kind of generally following our rhythm for the day. So we used to try to get a lift in, usually between like 11 and 12 o'clock at night. And so my counterpart and Gardner are in the gym, and I had been on the squat rack, and those guys were like, the new dudes were on the treadmill. And I said, hey, I looked at Gardner. I was like, hey, you better get your butt on the squat rack, son. You're getting ready to walk these mountains. It's the Hindu Kush. Like, you need to build up your legs. And he kind of pulls his shorts up a little bit and like shakes his quadricep at me. And he's like, yeah, I don't got any problem there, sir. And I could see some ink on his thigh. And I was like, what do you got there on your thigh? You got some ink? Let me see it. And it's the Army wrestling tattoo, like the AW with like the black star around it. Mm-hmm. And so he shows me the whole tattoo, and he's like, you don't know nothing about that, sir. Like as cocky as you can imagine. And so I show him mine on my thigh, and I was like, hey son, like my class invented that thing. And like his jaw, like it wasn't possible for a human being's jaw to drop any more than his did right then. He was just like, oh my God, who are you? Like, and so that was like,
that's awesome.
I don't know if you guys have that or have one of those tattoos or in anything, but I know it lasted at least to 2004. So there was it was Stein Edwards who drew that thing. And I know like Stein Edwards, Jarrett Matthews, myself, Pat McGinn, Denny Banks, Jerry Thomas all got it. And I know the guys in 2004 got it. And so that was after, Gardner and I started talking more, obviously after, we had that connection, right? And then I ended up in a later tour, I linked up with him after that at Fort Leavenworth when he went there as a student, and I was in the pre-command course. And then he came through with his Cav Squadron as an XO at Fort Polk. I was the Cav Squadron senior trainer down there. I got to run him through the paces down there a little bit when he was on rotation.
World.
Yeah, so it was pretty awesome that he kind of like he flashes the Army wrestling tattoo, like he's like, you don't know nothing about that, sir. And I was just like, oh boy, here we go. Youngster doesn't know who he's talking to. No, so he was doing really, really good. But that was you never know where you're gonna link up with an Army wrestler. And it is always fun as I go through when I hear guys are like, they talk to me about other people, they're like, oh, he was an Army wrestler. I'm like, when is he there? Because if it's anywhere between like 1995 and 2001, if he's anywhere in those classes and I don't know him, then he's lying to you. Like, there's not that many dudes, and I know all of them, right? Like, that's been a thing like throughout my career. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say something about somebody being an Army wrestler, and I was just like, are you sure? How old are they? Because if they're my age and they haven't been in the room, there's like, you guys know, there's a limited amount of people. Like, I'm always shocked to see like that's another reason I think Coach Ward has got it going on right now. 15 guys making it through 4 years in the program is insane. Like,
pretty crazy.
I mean, when I went through me and my buddies graduated, there were 7 of us that were still wrestling after 4 years, which was like, it was like 3 or 4 for the 3 or 4 years previous to me, at least, right? 7 was a lot.
Yeah.
And so that's, that's an indicator of good culture when guys are sticking around that long, and, where the
Sure is.
B on your shirt, B-row, means something, right? They don't stick around because they don't like each other, right?
Yeah.
There's a definite brotherhood there that guys are sticking around, especially when you think of, hey, there's only 10 spots in the lineup. If you're graduating double-digit seniors in the program, there's something's going right in there. So that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited, man. It's pretty awesome to just be a part of that lineage, part of that tradition. So
couldn't say it better myself. So before we wrap things up, though, we want to hear who you want to hear on this show. If you got your top 3, have you listened to many episodes?
I'm at like 8 or 9 that I've listened to so far. So I've got some catching up to do. I know we're in like the 50s now. But I scrolled through today to see who's done a couple. So definitely, I would say, who would be fun if you could get, especially if you want to go back a little earlier, is to get like trying to get Kevin Hare. So Kevin Hare was a captain. Kevin Hare was class of 96, and he was a captain. He was a co-captain. His dad, the Judge Hare, was like one of our big donors. The Judge was always, he's a good Jersey kid. All right. But I ran into Kevin when I was at Fort Campbell when we were there. My son had to have emergency surgery, and I was at Fort Polk on a rotation, and some dude shows up in my son's hospital room, and my wife is like, she said, this doctor walks in, she says, hey, are you Mrs. Seagreaves? Are you married to Ryan Seagreaves? She's like, yeah. She's like, he goes, I'm Kevin Hare. I'm a doctor here at the hospital. I saw that name and I knew there was only one Seagreaves I've ever met, and I just came up to ask. And Kevin Hare like found my wife in the Vanderbilt Children's Hospital. But yeah, Kevin Hare is a great guy that he's doing really well. Certainly Matt Marciniak, if you can get Matt. Matt was a captain and a grad assistant. Matt was the grad assistant when I was a yuck. He's definitely a guy that used to jump on me when I was a plebe and he was a firstie. If you want to have a fun interview, probably would go after maybe like Bill Solinder. Bill was a class of 95. He was a heavyweight.
We haven't had any big guys on. We need to have some big guys on. Some heavyweights.
Yeah, Bill was a heavyweight. Or you could get Romeo Daniel. Romy was class of 95. Those guys were always super funny.
These are some new names. I haven't had, I wrote down Bill Solinder, 95, your group 95 heavyweight, funny guy. Got it down.
Other than that, I certainly recommend Jarrett Matthews. Jarrett was at the Campbell the same time we were. He's a fifth group guy, but I think he's down in Tampa right now.
Still in?
He is. My advice to all the groups: always go to your reunions. Do not skip. Every reunion I've been to, it's, I was with the wrestlers the whole time.
Shots fired at Rudy Chalednik. He just missed his 10-year reunion.
Shame. Always go. They're awesome. In fact, I don't go back enough. So definitely an awesome experience going back for your reunion. So no matter how you felt about the place as a cadet, that's over. And the common reaction, the common change in emotional disposition towards, your rockbound Highland home is all of a sudden like you love it. And all you do is remember the good stuff. So I definitely say that, especially for the Army wrestlers, right? You know, because we have a bond that's quite unique amongst all the other people that go there. So other than that, you know, guys, I've had a good time being on. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, this was a lot of fun. 'Cause, yeah, I was like, man, this is gonna be a long one. This is a great episode. Really. I want to like do a part 2 at some point later on and dive into some of the other things, but you know, we don't want our listeners to, we need this is going to be a sustainable podcast for the next 50 years or so. So we got.
And thank you for your service. Appreciate all that you've done and continue to do. And congratulations on retiring soon. It's a big milestone.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. And thanks for giving me, you know, that salad sticking out of the back of your hat. It gave me something to laugh at while I was talking. So
some motivation for you here in October.
Awesome.
No.
It was great to have you on, and
Yeah, thanks a lot.
for all the listeners out there, you know, appreciate you listening in. And this is had a lot of fun tonight.
All right. Be Navy.
Be Navy.
Thanks for tuning in to the BHAW Radio Show. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe and leave us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform. If there's something you'd like to hear on a future show, reach out to us on any of our social media, Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Or you can reach us at email, bhaw.radio@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your thoughts, and as always, go Army, be Navy.